So now we're going to go into our next segment where we talk about streaming wars. This is obviously stuff happening in the world of streaming video and all these different services, things like, the aforementioned CBS All Access, Disney Plus, that Peacock thing, if it ever comes out, all these different things that are going on in the world of streaming. So tell me, Eric, what caught your eye or interest in this week's segment for the streaming wars?
I found this article from Variety. This is dated December 17th, so it's a fairly recent article. Title of the article is Madison Avenue Tries to Pick a Winner in TV Streaming Wars. And what this is basically about is that they're talking about all these large companies that rely on advertising and how different streaming platforms are treating advertising. As people know, Netflix doesn't really have any advertising. They are entirely subscription based. They don't have any ads at all. And what's interesting is they're talking about some of these big players are kind of noticing this trend. Because right now, this is what's being projected, is they're saying that streaming will account for 60% of all video viewing in 2020, compared with 56% in 2018. And it's poised to account for 70% in 2024. And this is according to a report from Interpublic Group Magna, which is a media research company. And so people are taking notice of this because what they're saying is streaming is the future. More and more content is going to be viewed via streaming, which makes sense with all these streaming platforms, especially how high profile they are. And you have these big blue chip advertisers that they mentioned specifically, like Procter and Gamble and PepsiCo, big companies that rely on advertising to help with their brand, and them trying to figure out how they're going to position themselves for these streaming wars. And it's an angle I hadn't heard before, and I think it's an interesting angle because these are people that have big pockets. And so how ultimately will they affect these streaming platforms? Obviously, I think they're going to be looking at the ones that have ad-based platforms. I mean, they can't really support the other ones as much. Although they do mention there have been some creative ways that they've kind of gotten around this. You can think of things like product placement and other things that companies have done for quite some time to get past just normal traditional advertising. They mentioned specifically an example with Coca-Cola, where they actually revived the new Coke brand briefly, which I didn't even notice this. I didn't even know this happened. I heard about it way after the fact, although prior to reading this article. Revived the new Coke brand with Netflix for Stranger Things. And so they actually did that as a tie-in to Stranger Things. Coca-Cola brought New Coke, which was a massive failure back in the day. I remember that. So, interesting to see that apparently they're talking about how a lot of these other companies that really aren't directly involved in the streaming wars might have a big effect on who ultimately wins these streaming wars, and ultimately also how these streaming platforms are packaged. They talk about that a lot too, about the idea that these advertisers might be looking at ways to package these different streaming services in a way that's more appealing to them, so that they can be doing their ads. So it's kind of interesting. I think of they talk about in this article specifically. They talk about Universal Peacock, and we had mentioned in one of our previous segments, because I didn't realize apparently Universal Peacock is going to be ad based. So that's kind of an interesting one. They might be in a better position to get some leverage in terms of having support of these more traditional companies that, again, they wouldn't seem to have like a direct connection to the streaming wars. They're not doing their own platforms, but because traditional like terrestrial TV, it keeps waning, and the ratings keep going down, and the market share keeps going down. These companies are going to have to look at new ways to get their products out there. They're going to have to look at new ways to advertise. and they could be a big contributing factor because ultimately, money talks. Literally, money talks in this situation, and they may go ahead and support something like Universal Peacock because they don't really have a place to support Apple Plus or Netflix or even Disney Plus. So because there literally is no ad revenue to be had. There's no ad system in place, and I personally, I've tried to advocate for platforms that are ad based because I do think cost is a huge factor in the streaming wars for the consumer. And we did a previous segment. We talked about how expensive it would be if you had all of these platforms, and it gets kind of ridiculous. So supporting the ad-based platforms definitely might be a way to go, and that might be a big contributing factor to some of the winners and losers of these streaming wars.
Interesting. Yeah, they would obviously have a huge impact, and it is going to be interesting to see how it changes the dynamic of what's going on. Because eventually, if the ad revenue money is at the level that generally is believed to be being spent on a regular basis, eventually the current streaming services that do not have ad-based platforms, I could see them down the road rolling out ad-based platforms as a way to capture more of that money, as they need to continue to show, investors and whoever, in terms of, bolstering stock prices and whatever, they have to be able to show that they're moving those directions to bring in that extra revenue. And that's a way eventually they can all grow, even if they're not currently doing it. That's an obvious avenue they can grow. It's like, oh, we're going to integrate advertising now, and then how are they going to sell that to the people that are paying for the service? They're going to make you pay to watch ads. You know what I mean? Like, how is that going to work? So,
yeah, I'm a big detractor of the fact that, for instance, Hulu and CBS All Access have a smaller price point to use their service with ads. And I'm glad that it's a smaller price point, but it's like I don't really like the idea of having to pay for ads. I haven't liked it ever since cable. I'm paying for cable, but I'm paying to watch networks that still have ads.
Right.
I get the model with like HBO or Showtime or Cinemax, a lot better. That hey, it's a premium. You don't have any ads. I got it. I'm on board with that. And at the same time, I'm a big advocate of ad-based channels, like terrestrial channels that you can, get with an antenna. I have an antenna here at home. I watch a lot of terrestrial TV. Likewise, we've talked about platforms like Crackle and Tubi and Pluto TV. These are all ad-based. They're free, and they're also widely available on a variety of platforms. They specifically talk about a platform that I'm not very familiar with called Quibi, Quibi.
Yeah.
They say that's a short form video startup, and they're actually going to be offering quick hit videos with things like CBS 60 Minutes, Comedy Central's Reno 911, some kind of interesting content. It kind of seems to me like they're trying to compete with the YouTube corporate base. You see a lot more of those types of videos on YouTube, where you have like the SNL skits, things like that. That's what I'm kind of and it says what's interesting is even though they're kind of competing in this space where it looks like they're going to probably get killed by YouTube, they've already built a big advertiser base. It said they announced in October that they had struck deals for $150 million in commercial inventory. In other words, they've basically sold $150 million in ads already. And they've gotten people like Discover Card, General Mills, T-Mobile, and Taco Bell that have already signed up and are buying ads with them. So that's kind of interesting. It kind of tells you that because they're ad-based, they have access to kind of this big pool of money that otherwise is just sitting there, and nobody's getting that. It's just because all these companies have a very large advertising budgets. So it's kind of interesting. I haven't, like I said, I haven't seen many people talking about this aspect of it. I think it'll be talked about a lot more when Peacock comes out, because as I understand it, Peacock is ad based and it's going to be a big one. It's going to be a big player.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting because I think that is definitely one of the larger ones that's going to roll out and be ad based. They have a lot of that premium content that they've been taking back, from Netflix, and they have a lot of they have a lot of great content just in general because it's universal. So, and it'd be interesting to see too how as they pull that content off from all these other services where it's currently available. Unless they decide to leave it because it's just an additional revenue stream for them. You know what I mean? It'd be interesting to see how it changes the dynamic. So
I think it's also interesting to see what's already happened with Netflix, who doesn't have ads, and the ways that companies are trying to get around that and still kind of cash in things like Stranger Things and other shows that are on these streaming platforms that don't have ads. So they are trying to get creative with it. And it's going to be a contributing factor because they are. You talk about Coca-Cola, that's some major money they're swinging around.
Right. Cool. Well, I don't have anything for this Streaming Wars segment. Do you have anything else?
No, that was it.